sometimes it's okay to bring somebody in if you can't do something, or to collaborate with somebody on something that maybe you're not good at, or it's an instrument you don't play. It's okay. A lot of people think it's a sign of defeat or something because they just don't want someone else helping them do something because it makes them feel like they're incompetent. That's not the case. It's okay. Sometimes you have to do that, and it's good to do. And collaborating, I think, is a very good thing to do sometimes. I don't do a lot of it for certain reasons, but there are some times when you really need to bring somebody in on I call a hybrid collaboration. It's probably the best time to do it because there might be an instrument you don't play. Like, for instance, I'm not a cello player. And I say that because I have just recently connected with somebody that's a fellow composer on a publisher that I'm with, that he just released an album, and he did an amazing job on it. I was listening to it going, I would love for this guy to put cello parts on an album or collaborate with him here this next year. And I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing to do. If you're not a guitar player, it's okay. Bring it on. I think hybrid genres, if you're doing two different genres, I think it's a good and healthy thing to do. I don't do a lot of it. I think there's only like a few people I would collaborate right now because I could trust. And it kind of leads to something I've been wanting to talk about, that if you're going to collaborate with people, you have to be extremely careful about what you're doing. Be careful about who you collaborate with, I'm telling you. And I'm going to kind of break down what happened to me and probably the best way to vet people. I'm going to kind of refer to a couple of people, but I'm not going to get into naming names. And I got to ask one thing here, please, if you're watching this video. Excuse me. Please don't, if you could, please do not. If you think you know who I'm talking about or anything, please don't put names in the comments or anything, because that's not what I'm here to do. I'm not here to trash people or state that somebody's a bad person for this, because honestly, the two people I'm referring to, and when I talk about this, I don't think they're bad people at all. I think their intentions may have been good, but hopefully by then now they've realized that what they're doing is unethical and they had to stop doing it. It wasn't cool. And there's a couple of different things that were going on. And the one individual I'm talking about in collaboration, I met in this group with this other individual, and I was just like, time out. I know what's going on here, and I don't want any part of it. It's too big of a liability, and it's a career killer, and I can't deal with this. I kind of found out about this one individual who, guess he claimed as composer. To this day, I don't know what the guy does. I know what he does during the day professionally, and it kind of blows my mind, but it goes to show you that it doesn't matter who you do, what you do, who you are, where you come from, or your background or anything of the such. That behavior comes in all shapes, forms, and sizes with people, and it really, you can't, excuse me, my keyboard, I hit it. You can't judge things based on that, This, certain behaviors aren't confined to one type of individual. It's just the way it is in life. It's just who we are. I think these two guys just figured they could manipulate the system a little bit to try to get on it, just to get in this industry, and figured, well, I can get ahead of it by leveraging other people in ways, and the way I'm doing it is not right. And I'm going to talk about that for a second, for a few minutes here. I really do want to talk about this. And when I say you got to be careful who you collaborate with, you've got to vet these composers, and you got to vet the people you're dealing with. If you are going along and you're out there and you see somebody's pushing this group, and we're a group of composers and we collaborate together, come on in, and you go in there and you find out there's this one guy who's reeling all the music in and wants to sign a collaborative contract with you, and all of a sudden there's really no collaborating going on, but yet he's taking your music and he's throwing it to these publishers and taking half your writers. Don't do that. Don't do that at all. You don't need somebody to do that when you can do it on your own. Pitch to your own publishers. You can do it. You don't need somebody to do that. They'll claim, well, let us do all the work for you and blah, blah, blah. We'll get you covered and we'll build your career and blah. I'm like, no, you don't need that. Because, and this was a situation of a group I got in, we were supposed to collaborate and it wasn't happening. I think I did a total of 3 or 4, maybe 5 tracks. And before the 5th one, I knew what was going on and I didn't really want to do it anymore. And the thing about it is there were about 3 tracks that I just took and just submitted to a publisher. Now, I had submitted to this publisher before some rock tracks, but they didn't take them at the time. It's a publisher I'm signed with now, and I do fairly well with, pretty well with, indeed. I do a lot of music for these guys. I managed to build my own relationship with them. But I was like, if they're taking my music and this guy hasn't done one thing to except throw it to them because he just wants half of somebody's writers, I can do it on my own. I don't need him to do that. I don't need him. Do not let anyone make you think that you can't submit to these publishers without them, or they're not going to take your music without that guy intervening and trying to take half your writers to do it. Don't do it. If you talk to a publisher and he says, well, right up front, with no reason at all, says, I took half writers, and he can't tell you why except his only excuse is, because we're doing the revisions, I'm doing the paperwork, that's no excuse. That's what he's getting 100% publishing for. Taking half your writers is no excuse for something like that. That's no excuse. Now, if he were helping you write the track and collaborating with you, that's a valid excuse. Now, this particular individual in the group that I was in, I think I know who taught him that behavior and doing that. It's another publisher. I'm not going to name names. I will tell you that the 2 of them, they're partners in that publisher. They played for a big 80s band. And again, I ask you guys, don't put names or who you think it might be in the comments. Please don't do that. And I've never sent music to them, but don't care for their music practice. I don't care if they were the Beatles. They played for the Beatles. If you don't have a valid reason, there's not a plan in place or some good reason, you're not taking half my writers. You're just not going to do it. It's not worth sending music to you for that. There are other publishers that appreciate my music giving me 100% of what's due to me. And by volume, their 100% side of the publishing can add up to be quite a bit of money. Excuse me, you get a library that's got 50 to 75,000 tracks or more in it, and they're spinning out everywhere. They're making pretty good income, much less other things that are going on, So that's why that split exists. There's a reason why it does. But in this group, there was a guy that was hitting me up that said, hey, man, I got some really cool tracks. I'd love to collaborate with you. I'll send them to you. I got some people, man. They want to, can sign some tracks. They said, we're going to do they have some tension, but they're hip hop, but you do incredible tension stuff. He'd been watching me. He knew, but he didn't know how long I'd been in this business. And I don't know why I didn't pick up at verse why when he sent me these tracks, they were just, looking back on it, I'll say they were, I say Frankenstein loops, and they had no ending. And there's a red flag there, guys. Number one, if they send you stuff and it sounds really good, but there's no ending to it, or there's no completion, or there's no structure beyond just there's these parts and they're looped. You got to vet this stuff. And there's places like Shazam the music, and other technology that you can vet. Get out on the internet and vet this individual. See if they have social media. See what they're doing. Ask them what, stuff they're using, like what DAW. Are you using Logic Pro? Do you use Persona Studio One Pro? Do you use Reason? Do you use Cubase? Do you use Ableton? What do you do? Talk to them a little bit. Fill them out. You're going to know pretty quick if they're legitimate. If they're in a publisher with you and they're writing music and they're doing things, after a while, you're going to be able to tell. If they send you files and you know based on how they send it to you, based on, like there's people one guy in particular I composed with in Mexico City, great composer. You can tell by the way he's talking and the way your email correspondence and way you're exchanging files, and you're going to tell by other things that they're legitimate composers. I've composed with this guy, and he writes with a couple of publishers that I write with extensively, and I stay in contact with him. He's a really nice guy and a hell of a talent. There's a guy here locally I've written with. There's only 2 or 3 people that right now I could trust to compose music with. But there's other people, like I told you, this guy I want to connect with the first of the year, who's an incredible celloist. And I could tell when you vet it, you know that they're legitimate composers. I'm going to tell you one of the biggest ways, if you get like this group I stepped off, these people they're trying to connect with all these composers and bringing music in, and you don't know what's going on, what direction, you don't know who they're submitting the music to. When they send you stuff to write to, you don't know where that music's been or whose it is. All you got to do is go to their repertoire on BMI or ASCAP. And I call it a repertoire. Their repertoire is the list of registrations for these tracks that they have in BMI and ASCAP. Go look at it. If their whole repertoire has nothing but a bunch of different co-writers with it and everything, in a lot of cases, that's a red flag. Now, that's not to say people don't write a lot with other composers, but if they got 5,000 registrations and the majority of them, 90% of them, have all co-writers, I would be cautious on that deal. That either they're just trying to take your music to get half your writers, or it's a composer who's doing what this guy did. And what he did is he was taking the same sets of music that were from loops and construction kits from Splice. That's the only thing I can gather, and everyone else could gather, that it's either someone else's music or was in a loops and construction kits. And it had to be from loops and construction kits, because when you Shazam it, other artists come up and they're hacks, and you look them up and it's all, they're taking those loops and they're taking all these Splice loops and all these construction and putting them together, trying to make it off like it's their music. And sadly, there's a lot of that going on out there. And you wonder why publishers and music supervisors are so protective. This is why. They get emails, one, that are unprofessional from people that may have music. Some of it may not be up to par. And then you get, or structured right for film and TV. But then you get a lot of stuff like that it's not their music and they know it. You can tell, like, this guy's Frankenstein loops together and stuff, and he's calling it his own, and it's not. And it's such a liability and a career killer, and they know it. That kind of stuff's going to get you sent, as I've always said, to the dark side, to the junk folder, and they'll never see your email again. You'll get ghosted. It can end your career quicker than it gets started, before it even gets started. This kind of practice, this behavior. So this guy was taking the same sets of songs. It must have been a total of about 20 or 25, 30 pieces or tracks, or so-called, sending them to different composers. It wasn't just me, and I didn't know this. And you live and learn. I've been doing this, at the time this happened, I'd been doing this 11 years, 12 years maybe. 11 years, because it's been a couple of years. And I'm writing good stuff over this stuff. And we're sending it, and it's getting sent to a couple of publishers. Only about 2 I know the stuff was sent to. So, moving forward, I was at the Production Music Conference in 2019. And I was having a conversation with one of my publishers, and 3 other guys were standing that I've since connected with. And I think some of them I had met the year prior. Actually, I had met a few years prior in 2016 at my Verse Conference. I had really connected with them in 2018 or 2019. 2019 especially, when one of them, we were standing there and this guy's name came up. We were just talking about people that were signed to his label that I had worked with and blah, blah, blah. The publisher I was talking with, that I worked with from time to time, didn't say anything, but the other guy and the other 2 behind him were like, they heard, like, were asking me about that name and what about him. And then they said, let's go sit down. The 4 of us need to have a talk. We sat down at either one of the side couches or a table or something, and I got an earful about what, exactly what was going on. And I could tell by the pattern it was the same sets of songs, sending different composers. And then what had happened, he was sending the same sets of stuff to different composers and that same music back into the same publishers. This guy had created a mess for a lot of publishers. And I didn't feel so bad after I found out how big of a mess for these several publishers that wrote him, that removed him from the roster and blacklisted him. And I'm not 100% sure, but there may have been some music supervisors that caught wind of this, and some other people. There are a lot of composers, I think, that caught wind and said, listen, I can't work with this guy anymore. And I don't think he's a bad guy. I just think his business practices were not cool. And I think that maybe he thought, well, this was the right thing to do. And I'm hoping that maybe he's learned you cannot do that. And as time progressed after that, and I started to go get out of him, tell me if there's something you can't do. Just tell me. It's okay. You know, if you can get a deal for my music, I'll be glad to split some sync money with you, or split some writers with you a little bit. If you know, kind of like this particular guy would be an amazing sync agent, or somebody who could really, because he knew how to talk to people. Because the other guys go, you know, he's not a bad guy. He's a really nice guy. I think he's a great person. All in all, I think he's, you know, he's a family guy, and he could come in here. He probably knows the majority of the room if he came to the conference. He could wheel and deal all the way to the back door and out, you know, that kind of thing. But in lieu of what was going on with him and the guy that was running that group, I can't work with them anymore. They're a liability, because they could be the greatest composers in the world, but I can't work with them anymore. I can't do that. And it's sad. So after that epiphany at the conference, I kind of went on about my business, and I didn't think about my music and these publishers. I just said, you know, I really can't work with this guy anymore. I got to vet. I started to Shazam this stuff, and it's coming up all over the internet. And I started to search to see if I could find it in Splice or some of these loop packs that may have been older. And I couldn't find out exactly where it came from. So I get a message from one of the publishers. And both of these publishers that music with were up in New York, but one of them was like, hey man, just touching base with you. We've got about, I can't remember how many tracks it was with this one publisher. I want to say it was about 8 to 10 tracks, maybe 12. We're going to be removing these tracks and disabling them. And I was like, what's going on? Everything okay? I mean, it's not fitting your thing. He goes, well, they were sent in by this other guy. They set up as like, that guy's technically the artist, you're the composer. I was just a co-composer on them. Just letting the both of y'all know there's some things going on with that, with other things that had nothing to do with you, but just be careful, you know, what is going on musically. And I just went into panic mode. I was like, oh my God. I got on the phone with him and said, listen, I started, I knew which tracks it was when I signed on. I said, listen, I need to tell you if, you know, can you tell me what is concerning about these tracks? I have an idea, and some things I've caught wind on here I didn't realize until you emailed me, and I have been just doing my thing here, but can you kind of give me some insight of what's going on? He goes, well, I can't tell you everything, but I can tell you that in these tracks, there were some hip-hop stuff, and some of the same stuff sent to other composers kept being sent back into our library, sent it to other composers, sent it to other libraries. In other words, a lot of these libraries talk, guys. This library was talking about a bunch of other libraries, and libraries that were submitting into like Universal APM type libraries, and these other guys, just different libraries and people in the industry. It's a big industry, guys, but it's small because people talk and word gets around. This will get you blacklisted if you're not careful on this. So I had to spend my time going to these sessions and vetting. These were my parts, and those were his parts. That's what he sent me. And they're like, that's exactly it. We know. They said, we can listen to the stuff you sent by yourself. We can tell what your parts are. You're okay, man. It's okay. It took me some time. I had to save a relationship with these guys. The other library just removed the tracks and wouldn't tell me why, but I knew and didn't say anything, thank God. But they removed them. So pretty much everything I did with that guy is out of libraries, and thankfully, it didn't hurt me, but I'm sure it may have hurt him. And, hopefully they learn from that. These are the things you can get involved in if you don't vet this stuff with these people. If you don't vet the composer and you don't vet the music. And listen, guys, it's okay. If you don't really know somebody that well and they send you pieces of music and you Shazam them, nothing comes up and you still aren't sure, don't do it. Your gut feeling should tell you, right now I'm going to hold off on it, but thank you so much. Maybe we'll compose later on down the road. It's okay to do that. But this could have been a career killer for me and many other people. When I found out the mess he caused a lot of publishers, and this one particular publisher, the first one I mentioned, it caused a big problem for them. It caused them to have to really restructure and be very cautious and vet things very carefully and put new policies, new procedures in place, because there are some publishers out there that take this stuff with, top line splice loops, and they don't care. They just don't care. It was my understanding, somebody had told me that, and I can't remember who it was, whether it was a composer that worked with this guy or somebody said, they had mentioned that they had told other publishers that music was in, that, listen, they need to check that stuff. And I don't know if it was one of those publishers that said, hey, I called a buddy of mine over there and told him, I think that's what it was. I was on a Zoom call with that particular publisher, probably a 2-hour call going through all this stuff, just trying to save my relationship with him. And thank God it did. I think my relationship with him is better now because of it. Because I think they knew my willingness. But these guys talk to each other. Just because they're other publishers you consider competition, they still talk to each other in the industry. And these conferences, they talk, guys. I just told you an example of one. You've got to do things ethical. You got to vet things. And I'm not trying to scare you if you're new to this business, but I'm trying to make you realize that you have to vet these people. And it's because of that, it's gotten me very cautious and not wanting to collaborate with a lot of people unless I really know them. You have to be very careful about that, my friends. You really do. I kind of hope these guys have maybe realized that's not the cool thing to do. Maybe not. If they haven't, well, eventually, if their career comes to a complete stalling end, they'll figure it out. I just don't think it's cool just to go sit around trying to reap on people's writers, just to take their music and make them think that, they can't get in this publisher without me. Or people that are taking music that doesn't belong to them, or music that comes from a loop and construction kit that you're technically supposed to change and make your own. And call it their music and say, it's my music. And no, it's really not, man. You can't do that stuff. You cannot do that stuff. Because the old saying, guilty by association, if you compose with somebody and a publisher removes that guy because of practices like that, they're going to associate you with it, and they're going to put you in that category. So if you go email and send your music to them directly, they're going to remember you were with that other guy. Sorry, can't take your music, you're a liability. And that is something you don't want happening to you in this business. You do not want it happening. So listen, I just wanted to get on and talk about that and go, it's okay to compose, guys, with other artists. It's okay to collaborate. Just vet them carefully. Don't be afraid to do that, but just be very careful. Be very cautious. It's pushing 25 minutes and I'm going to hop off, but I wanted to get on and talk about that real quick. I didn't want to drag it out and do a whole litany on this, but I did want to lay it out. And like I said, I'm going to ask you, please don't put names on here, because I'm not trying to trash individuals or say these people are bad. I think they're, overall, I've met one of them in person. I think they're good people. I think their heart is in the right place, except picking business practices that aren't ethical, that aren't cool, or just, I don't know. It's kind of hard to, ethical can be a really harsh word to put, but I think their practices had bad intentions they didn't realize at the time were bad, but maybe they've learned and realized, and I hope they put a stop to it. I really do. It's not cool. If you're in a group where you got composers, give them 100% of their writers and do a sub-pub deal. Do it right. Don't take all this music in and supposedly you have these projects going on. You're getting paid a salary, dude. You're taking their music and all that money and then giving them half writers. That ain't cool, because that was going on too, supposedly. there was these documentaries that guy was working on, and he's getting paid but taking people's music and half their writers. And there was one thing he did that why I knew I wasn't dealing with him again was I had told him, these are the publishers I'm signed with. I don't want my music over there. If we're going to collaborate, we're going to collaborate on something. Maybe if it's a brief from those publishers, that's understandable. But let's find new publishers. And he took a track he was looking for. He was supposedly working on this documentary and said, I need some tension, ticking. And time went by and I didn't hear anything. And all of a sudden I get a Schedule A form from this publisher I've got almost 900 tracks with. It would have taken that from me 100%. And that track was not a fit for that publisher. It should have gone to another one where it would have gotten placed. And he just threw it into that publisher. And that just right there, I'm going to tell you, it made me mad. It pissed me off. But I just said, I'm going to let it go. I just can't work with this guy anymore. And that was that one track. I said, I'm going to give him one more track. I want to see what's going on here. I want to know. I don't need somebody to take my music and put it in the publishers when I can do it myself, When we're really supposed to be a collaborative effort, collaborating on music. There was one track I did out of that 5 that was collaborated on, and I don't know who put music on it or what was done. I don't think the keyboard part that was put on there fit it, but I let it go. It is what it is. So anyway, I'm getting off. I appreciate you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Be cool. Bye.